spam. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dennis McNamara from LIR-FM. It is with great pleasure tonight we present a gentleman who records for Rolling Stone Atlantic Records. The current album is Bush Doctor. For the first time ever live on WLIR-FM, would you please give a warm welcome to Peter Tosh.
Well, as even the most ardent supporters of the Contras now concede, this is what they call a proxy army, which is attacking Nicaragua from foreign bases, is entirely dependent on its masters for direction and support, has never put forth a political program, has created no base of political support within the country, and it is led its entire almost its entire top military command is Somoza's officers. Its military achievements so far consist of a long and horrifying series of very well documented torture and mutilation and atrocities, and essentially nothing else. The administration officials are now openly conceding in public that the main function of the Contras is to retard or reverse the rate of social reform in Nicaragua, and to try to terminate the openness of that society. The state of siege, for example, which was imposed last fall, and which is very mild, I should say. There's much political opening in Nicaragua, as everyone there, up to the American ambassador, will tell you. That corresponds roughly to the state of siege which has been in place in El Salvador since early 1980, except that in El Salvador it has been associated with a huge massacre of tens of thousands of people, destruction of the press, and so on and so forth. Whereas in Nicaragua it is a reaction to a war that we are carrying out against them with precisely the purpose of trying to retard social reform and to restrict the possibilities of an open and developing society. And that's a cruel and savage policy which we should terminate.
CHOMSKY trying to respond, among other things, to the original picture that totalitarian.
Well, let's just first of all talk about the facts. I stated again that the military leadership of the Contras is almost entirely drawn from the top, from the Somoza's National Guard. In fact, it's 46 out of 48 of the top military commanders, according to Edgar Chamorro. These are not fighters. This is the top military commander. Excuse me. I let you go on. Did I let you?
You engaged in the series.
Stand up proud, set yourself free. Set yourself
Now, Mr. Silver has a very good reason for not wanting us to walk, and that is that he knows because he doesn't want to man have a chance to say,
no, just let me finish.
There is no time to hide. I mean, no time. 400 years.
Let me really, I control the American press. Let me repeat. Let's go back to the facts. 46 out of 48 top military commanders of the Contras are Somozist officers. You can find that in the congressional report. You can find Edgar Chamorro, who was the CIA appointed spokesman. That's exactly what I said. It's exactly true. As to the idea that the Sandinistas have carried out massacres on a par with those that we have been carrying out in Central America, this is really astonishing. In El Salvador, the number of people massacred since 1978 since 1979, when we moved in force, is on the order of 60,000. In Guatemala, where we incidentally have been supporting it all the way through with military aid, which never terminated, and are now supporting it enthusiastically, the number of people massacred is on the order of 100,000. Mr. Silver referred to the Mosquito Indians, who were badly treated, I should say. The figures are that approximately 60 or 70 were killed. Many more than that, whereas in contrast, about 5,000 or 6,000 people have been killed, and I don't mean killed. This is not garden variety killing. This is torture, murder, and mutilation, massively documented in great detail by our forces. Now, there are crimes of the Sandinistas, there's no doubt, but they are undetectable in comparison with the crimes of the government.
I'd like to go back to the two central arguments that this whole thing turns on. One is the notion that Sandinist Nicaragua poses a security threat to the United States and to this hemisphere. Secondly, that we owe it to the so-called Democrats, the democratic notion, to help people who are carrying our standard in the region. On the question of the security threat to the hemisphere and to this country.
Well, to talk of Nicaragua as a security threat is a bit like asking what security threat Luxembourg poses to the Soviet Union. Mr. Silver mentioned Hitler, and I'm old enough to remember Hitler's speeches in which he talked about the threat to Germany posed by Poland, from which Germany had to defend itself. And we're facing that kind of, and even that's unfair to Hitler to draw that example. The fact is, if we want, it is quite true that Nicaragua is now Soviet-armed and heavily armed. And the reason is that it's being attacked by a superpower which has specifically blocked every other source of supply. For example, up until the May embargo last year, 20% of Nicaraguan trade was with the Soviet bloc. Prior to that, its arms were coming from everywhere. We then blocked arms from everywhere else. As we intensify the war, they do exactly what the U.S. government wants them to do, namely they divert resources from the social reforms which we really fear, and they turn them towards militarization. If we want the idea that Nicaragua could attack the countries of, I might add that the countries of Latin America regard this as hysterical lunacy. Every country, all the Contadora countries, all the support countries, which include all of the relatively democratic countries in Latin America, are pleading with us to call off the war against the country because they understand perfectly well exactly what it's doing. It's forcing them to be a militarized state, and it's creating a danger of a wider war in the region. We want to get the Soviet tanks out of Nicaragua, and the Soviet advisors, and there are very few, the Cuban advisors out. What we should do is very simple, and everyone in the government knows it. Call off the war, and they will return to what they were doing before we attacked them, namely creating the most effective social reforms in the hemisphere, which were widely praised by the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, organizations like Oxfam, which describe them as unique in their experience in 76 developing countries, and which we have retarded and stopped by this attack.
We were running so far over time that we might just as well keep going. Chomsky, when you hear this call to come to the rescue of democracy and democratic forces, what do you answer?
I would be delighted if the United States were to reverse its long-standing policies of opposing democratic forces throughout Central America and begin to support those forces. Now, to return to Nicaragua and to return to the real world, I never described the Sandinistas as perfect Democrats or whatever your phrase was. What I did was quote the World Bank, Oxfam, the Jesuit Order, and others who recognized that what they were doing was to use the meager resources of that country for the benefit of the poor majority. That's why health standards shot up. That's why literacy shot up. That's why agrarian reform proceeded, the only place in the region. That's why subsistence agriculture improved and consumption of food increased. And that's why we attacked them. It had nothing to do with democracy. Now, I also did not say that Cruz and Rebello committed atrocities. In fact, Cruz and Rebello sit in Washington and don't do anything. They're figureheads who we concocted. The people who commit atrocities are the Contra forces, led by the National Guard, and of all the figures he mentioned, one is involved, namely Calero, who's an ultra-right-wing businessman and represents the extremist narrow business forces in Nicaragua. Now, if we had the slightest concern with democracy, which we do not in our foreign affairs and never have, we would turn to countries where we have influence, like El Salvador. Now, in El Salvador, they don't call the archbishop bad names. What they do is murder him. They do not they do not censor the press. They wiped the press out. They sent the army in to blow up the church radio station. The editor of the Independent newspaper was found in a ditch, mutilated and cut to pieces with machete. May I continue? I did not interrupt you.
Don't you ever want to put a time value on anything you say? Or do you want
that was I'm talking about 1980.
You are a systematic liar.
Did these things happen or didn't they?
These things did not happen in the context in which you suggest
Really?
at all. And when you suggest that Cruz is simply a figurehead and does nothing, you overlook the fact that Arturo Cruz was the ambassador of the Sandinistas
Yes.
to the United States.
And he is
he
always
was the head banker of the
Exactly.
Sandinistas
In the
until
United
he finally
States.
broke with them
And
when he
exactly.
found out that
Fine.
they were utterly totalitarian. You are a phony, mister, and it's time that
Yeah.
the people
Well,
read you straight.
it's clear why you want to divert me from the discussion that
No, it's not.
Yeah,
It's
no,
because
but let
you
me
just get tired of rubbish.
excuse me. The Arturo Cruz, exactly as I said, was in the United States. He was brought.
Why was he in the United States?
He was brought to the United. He was in the United States, and he defected in the United States. He was brought back to Nicaragua as a political figure because the business-based opposition there had no credible candidate. He did not participate in the elections as he could have, in part because of.
He couldn't.
May I
because he was
continue?
wrong. No, because you're lying again.
I gotta cut you both
You didn't.
off.
I didn't say anything
The
yet.
Torpers were the ones who prevented Cruz from participating in the election. He
I
didn't
gotta
get
cut you
to
both
vote.
That's another fabric. But let's
You've
continue
given-
with.
Except we can't. I'm afraid we're out of time. You've given President Reagan a tough act to follow on Sunday night. We thank you both, John Silver and Noam Chomsky.
Okay.
There's no rest, there's no rest, there's no rest for the wicked like There's no rest, there's no rest. There's no rest, there's no rest. For the wicked. There's no rest.
Jugging is massive now.
Live in India on the rooftop. Woo! The smoke is burning.